Thank you all for coming. We will call to order the December meeting of the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Senator Rocky Adams. Senator Thayer.
Here.
Co-Chair West.
Here.
Senator Yates.
Present.
Representative Bridges.
Here.
Representative Fraser Gordon.
Here.
Representative Herron.
Here.
And Chair Lewis.
Here. First matter of business, with a quorum present, the subcommittee is duly constituted to do business. First matter of business is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Second.
Without objection, so ordered. Now, before we begin, we do want to take a moment to recognize one of our members here today, and always very vocal, but Senator Thayer is retiring the General Assembly after 21 years of service, including over 3 years. 22, sorry. Over 3 years on this committee. Would staff please read the citation, please?
The General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, to all to whom these presents shall come, greetings. Know ye that Senator Damon Thayer is recognized and honored for more than 2 decades of exemplary service as a member and leader of the Kentucky General Assembly, where he has most ably represented the citizens of Senate District 17 since assuming his seat in 2003. In addition to serving with great distinction as Majority Floor Leader for the past 12 years, he has offered particular recognition for his contributions as a member of the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee, where he was appointed at the onset of his legislative career in 2003 and was elected to serve as the committee's first Senate co-chair when the committee went from 7 to 8 members and to 2 co-chairs. He would serve in that capacity from May 2003 until December 2004. He returned to ARRS in January 2023 and will close out his legislative career as a distinguished committee member. Over the course of his tenure with the committee, he has earned a stellar reputation for consistently fostering constructive collaboration with ARRS staff, for continually bringing his knowledge and experience to bear for the benefit of the state's signature industries and to remove artificial barriers to commerce, and for contributing immeasurably to the overall efficacy and effectiveness of the committee during his membership. With a mastery of legislative and regulatory processes, Senator Thayer has been a tireless advocate for legislative independence and oversight and for the continued separation of powers. Inasmuch as Senator Damon Thayer is a public servant of the highest caliber, who has earned a stellar reputation among his colleagues and constituents for his integrity and leadership, and who has continually utilized the resources at his disposal to enhance the economic vitality and overall quality of life enjoyed by the citizens of the Commonwealth, he has offered profound appreciation for his years of invaluable service, is extended best wishes for the utmost success and good fortune as he embarks upon a well-earned retirement, and on the motion of Senator Stephen West, Representative Derek Lewis, and the members of the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee, is hereby deemed by this honorable body most worthy of its recognition.
Senator Thayer, thank you. I consider you a great friend, and it's been an honor to learn under your leadership since I've been here. I believe my co-chair would like to say something else as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's an auspicious day. Really nice to have this citation for Senator Thayer as chair of this co-chair of this committee. It's when he came on board recently that the deferrals skyrocketed for some reason. I don't know why, but. Going to really miss your work, your tenacity on this committee and everything you do. Going to miss what you've done for the signature industries, especially horse racing, bourbon, and all that. Most of all, going to miss your friendship and all you've done for me in my time here. I really, really appreciate it. And Godspeed. Thank you.
Of course, Senator Thayer. Any words?
First of all, Representative Lewis, as long as the retirement board knows that it's 22 years, that's the thing that really matters. This is very kind. I didn't expect this today, so you kind of got me right in the feels, so thank you. That citation was so well written and so well read. I'm very grateful. I think the happiest people around are all the folks representing the agencies, because they know that my first response when I wake up in the morning and come into this committee is to move to find it deficient. So you won't have me to make those motions for you anymore. I have to find someone else to wear the black hat, Mr. Chairman. But this committee was the first committee I chaired 20 years ago, and it helped me gain a better understanding of how state government works and the constant and necessary friction between the legislative and executive branches. And I appreciate all the folks from the executive branch and the great work that they do and that they try to do. And I just want to say to the members of this committee, always remember about the separation of powers. And I have been on this committee when there has been a Republican governor, and I have on this committee when there's a Democratic governor. And both gubernatorial types from both parties will try from time to time to promulgate regulations that go beyond legislative intent. And there's a process set up for us to review those and to make sure that they are working within legislative intent. And it seems to be that system continues to work here this very minute on this very afternoon. I was really hoping we could find something deficient today in my last meeting, but it appears negotiations are taking place, and that may not be the case. But, Mr. Chairman, I'll be ready just in case. So, thank you. It's been a privilege, and I hate using the word retirement. I do like the word rewiring instead of retiring, because I'm not retiring. I've got lots of other things I want to do that this job has kept me from being able to do, and I'm going to pursue those things. But I'll be keeping an eye on what you guys are doing here, and look forward to seeing what kind of great work you do. So thank you very much today. I'm really privileged. Thanks.
We look forward to seeing it, sir. Don't be a stranger. With that being said, please call the first regulation.
Council on Postsecondary Education, 13 KAR 002-120 and 130, and 13 KAR 006-10 and 20. 13 002-120 and 130 have both agency and staff suggested amendments. 13 006-10 and 20 have staff suggested amendments.
13-120 and 130 amend the funding models for public universities and KCTCS institutions in accordance with Senate Bill 190, including to revise definitions, remove the underrepresented minority degree production allocation and student credential metric, which are replaced with provisions for first-generation students, add provisions for adult learners, and adjust allocations, weightings, progression metrics, and data averaging. The agency amendments for 13-120 and 130 amend various sections and incorporated material to revise funding model metrics in accordance with the Performance Funding Working Group recommendations. The staff suggested amendments for 13-120 and 130 amend various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. 13-120 is also amended to include the Council's criteria to determine fields of study for a STEM plus H bachelor's degree. 13-6010 and 020 establish provisions for aviation training scholarships and grants for aviation equipment. The staff suggested amendments for 13-6010 and 020 amend various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Please introduce yourself for the record.
Travis Powell, Senior Vice President and General Counsel for the Council on Postsecondary Education.
And it's my understanding, sir, that you would like to request, your agency would like to request a deferral on 13 KAR 2-120 and KAR dealing with the performance-based funding, correct?
Yes, based on some conversations prior to this meeting, we'd like to request a deferral. I think the issues mainly arise around the university model. However, in order to keep the regulations kind of together and on the same path, we'd like to request deferral for both regulations.
I appreciate that. I know we'll have a meeting in the near future, and I look forward to working with you and Dr. Thompson and everybody on board, but I do appreciate the deferral request. Is there a motion? There's a request for a deferral by the agency. Is there a second? Without objection, so ordered. The regulation is deferred. Now, the other two regulations, there are staff amendments.
Motion.
I'll make a second. Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions on the regulations from members of the subcommittee? Of course, Senator Thayer.
Thanks. I'd be remiss if I didn't comment on this proposal to make it easier for people with GPAs as low as 1.6 to access performance funding. That's not the legislative intent of the performance funding model. A GPA below 2.0 is probably someone who shouldn't be going to college anyway. So as you guys work forward on this, you might want to keep that under consideration.
Thank you, Senator Thayer. Co-Chair Steve West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a thought as you're going into these discussions. I know this is an issue that may come back next month. If you're back in here next month.
Sure.
Just make sure, and you may want to comment on this today, I'm not sure. Just make sure you have the statutory authority to do what you're trying to do. There's different sections of the statute, and you have the authority in one section to do it and not the other. We can talk offline about that. I can give you more details about that. But just keep that in mind. Make sure you may feel today you have the statutory authority to do this. I'm sure you do. You wouldn't be here.
Right.
But just take a fresh look at that if you don't mind, and we can talk offline.
Okay, yeah. I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, but yeah, we'd love to have those discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We did have somebody that signed up to speak. Michael, do you still want to speak, or do you want to wait?
I can just say a few quick words if I may. So.
Please approach.
Yep.
Please introduce yourself for the record.
Colleagues, good afternoon. My name is Michael Frazier, and I'm Executive Director of the Kentucky Student Rights Coalition. And as one of our members, as part of the coalition, I do represent Eastern Kentucky University Student Government Association by unanimous resolution. So when it comes to 13 KAR 2.120, the update to performance funding model, we unequivocally oppose the weights, and we do not think that the Council for Postsecondary Education, per SB 191 and the statutory construction, particularly underneath Section 1.6a and also Section 4 of the statutory scope that allowed for the redistribution and also redefining the underrepresented minority, allows them to include weights. The law of KRS 164.092 is explicitly clear of where it does allow weights and does not allow weights. And particularly when we want to do something that redefines and helps underserved populations in Kentucky, we want to ensure that we get this right because this is Kentucky's most vulnerable students. So I do appreciate the committee sub-review to defer this to defer the regulation. I'm grateful, and Kentucky students are grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to having these conversations. I do appreciate the agency's request for a deferral, and we'll see it next month and have discussions in between then. If there's no other questions, Representative Frazier Gordon.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment. I'm from Madison County, and of course, Eastern Kentucky University is I proudly represent them. But in this matter, of course, we're looking at all the different regional universities across the state, and they all extend resources to help students succeed academically. But it's my understanding that the performance funding is an undergraduate degree production model, and it should target and reward successful university efforts that support undergraduate students and the meaningful employment after graduation in Kentucky. So I just wanted to ask you to focus on that, and I appreciate the deferral and your willingness to work with us.
Thank you. And please, anybody that has questions, please reach out to me. I mean, we'll certainly talk, Chair Lewis, but and Chair West. But anybody else that has any questions about this, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Any other questions or comments from members of the subcommittee? Thank you all for coming today. Please call the next regulation.
I just want to make sure the aviation regulations we're good on those?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Please call the next regulation.
Personnel Cabinet. Oh, sorry. State Board of Elections, 31 KAR 004-230, and this regulation has a staff suggested amendment.
This regulation establishes the post-election audit procedure to be followed when performing the required hand-to-eye recount. The staff amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Please identify yourself for the record.
Good afternoon. Taylor Brown, General Counsel for the State Board of Elections.
Good to see you again.
Pleasure.
There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you for coming. Please call the next regulation.
Thank you all.
Now we have Personnel Cabinet 101 KAR 2210E, and so emergency and ordinary.
101 KR 2210E amends to incorporate by reference the 2024 and 2025 Plan Year Handbooks, and the ordinary amends to incorporate the 2025 Plan Year Handbook.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. Chris Chamness, Commissioner of the Department of Employee Insurance.
Thank you for coming today. There are no amendments to this regulation. Is there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Teachers Retirement System 102 KAR 001380. This regulation has a staff suggested amendment.
102 KAR 1380 establishes a new administrative regulation that outlines the requirements and processes for applying qualified domestic relations orders, QDROs, to the retirement accounts of TRS Tier 4 members, similar to those established in 102 KAR 1320 for TRS Tiers 1 through 3 members. The staff suggested amendment amends provisions to make technical corrections consistent with 102 KAR 1320 and include the URL for the website where material incorporated by reference may be viewed.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Bo Barnes, Deputy Executive Secretary and General Counsel for Teachers Retirement System.
Thank you for coming today. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendment?
Motion.
Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Board of Pharmacy 201 KAR 002030, 050, 210, and 465. All four of these regulations have agency amendments. 00230, 210, and 2465 also have staff suggested amendments.
201 KR 2030 amends to add a definition of good standing, establish a new classification of licensure adding in non-resident pharmacists, cross-references existing fees, cross-reference fees for non-resident licensure of $50 established in another regulation, and incorporate by reference the non-resident pharmacist licensure application. The staff suggested amendment amends Section 5 to correctly cross-reference the $250 fee for an application for an initial license transfer rather than the initial application fee, and cross-reference the $25 fee for the query to the National Practitioner Data Bank, and amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. The agency amendment amends the title in the NFC paragraph to delete references to the licensure of non-resident pharmacist, amends Section 1 to delete the definition of non-resident pharmacist license, amends to delete Section 6 through 10 in their entirety that cover non-resident pharmacist licensure, and amends Section 11 to delete the application for non-resident pharmacist license. 201 KR 2050 amends to add application renewal and delinquent renewal penalty fees of $50 for a non-resident pharmacist license, add cross-references to another regulation where the application for a permit and renewal for a non-resident pharmacy are incorporated, add all fees are non-refundable, Add applications expire 1 year after the date the application is received by the board, and delete in the material incorporated by reference the non-resident pharmacy permit forms incorporated in another regulation. The agency amendment amends Section 1 to delete the application, renewal, and delinquent renewal penalty fees of $50 for a non-resident pharmacist license. 201 KR 2210 amends to establish definitions, add provisions for automated filling systems, and final product verification, and make changes to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. The amended after comments version amends Section 72A to correctly cross-reference patient counseling requirements in Section 6 of the regulation. The staff amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. The agency amendment amends Section 5.7 to add an exception to requiring final product verification of a prescription as only occurring on the premises of the originating pharmacy if a permit holder has received prior board approval, and add that a single request may be made for commonly owned permit holders. 201 KR 2465 establishes requirements to obtain a non-resident pharmacy permit to engage in the practice of pharmacy in the Commonwealth. The amended after comments version includes in Section 4, under requirements to receive a permit as an out-of-state pharmacy, that evidence of good standing may include primary source verification if the regulatory or licensing agency of the state in which the pharmacy is located does not provide a letter that certifies that the pharmacy is in good standing, and deletes from the non-resident pharmacy policy and procedures manual the procedure for shipping products pursuant to FDA-approved manufacturer guidelines. The staff amendment amends various sections to comply with 13A. The agency amendment amends the NFC paragraph in Section 4.8 to delete the requirement that a person who engages in the practice of pharmacy for a Kentucky resident hold an active Kentucky pharmacist license, and amends to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
That was a long one.
Yeah.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Chris Harlow, Executive Director.
And Eden Davis, General Counsel.
Thank you all for coming. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendments?
Motion.
Second. Without objection, so ordered. There are also agency amendments, and I just want to say I appreciate the board's willingness to work with stakeholders on this and to get everything ironed out. I truly do. Thank you all for that. Are there any questions or discussions of the agency amendments? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval? Is there a second? Hey! Without objection, so ordered. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Please call the next regulation.
Board of Optometric Examiners, 201 KAR 005-005 and 005-090. 201-005-005 has a staff suggested amendment.
201 KR 5005 amends provisions to increase the renewal fee and the reinstatement fee from $250 to $300 in order to offset the administrative cost of updating software. The staff suggested amendment amends the relates to paragraph and makes technical corrections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A, and increases the initial license fee for consistency with the renewal license fee, reinstatement fee, and 201 KR 5090. 201 KR 5090 amends provisions to increase the certificate renewal fee from $250 to $300, consistent with 201 KR 5005, in order to offset the administrative cost of updating software.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record, please?
My name is Dr. Carolyn Munson. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the Kentucky Board of Optometric Examiners.
I'm Christy LeMay, and I'm the Executive Director.
Thank you all for coming today. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment?
So moved.
Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Board of Dentistry, 201 KAR 008-610.
201 KR 8610 establishes a new administrative regulation that governs the scope, procedures, and requirements for certified community health workers operating in a dental health setting under the oversight of an ordering dentist. The amended after comments version deletes language allowing dental community health workers to conduct oral screenings or risk assessments for chronic dental conditions in response to comments submitted by the Kentucky Dental Association.
I'm pinch hitting for the moment. Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Certainly. Jeff Allen, Executive Director.
Thank you so much. There are no amendments on this set of regulations. Do we have any questions from members on this regulation? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board of Embalmers and Funeral Directors, 201 KAR 01530, 50, 110, 120, and 125. All of these regulations have staff suggested amendments.
201 KAR 15030 is being amended to update language, processes, and fees for renewing an inactive license or reinstating an apprenticeship, update language for examination fees and requested services, and add material incorporated by reference. 15050 is being amended to require an applicant to submit a copy of a current National Criminal Justice Information System report, update the notice of changes to align with the needs of the Office for Records Management, allow apprentices to place their apprenticeship on hold for military orders, require an apprentice to complete at least one book report on statutes and regulations with their first sworn statement, and clarify calendar procedures. 15110 is being amended to allow a funeral establishment to enter into a contract with an embalmer employed by a different funeral establishment, add advertising rules for prohibitions against directly contacting customers, expand rules for funeral establishment closure, update and add material incorporated by reference, and make technical changes. 15120 is being amended to require that a reciprocity applicant take the jurisprudence examination, authorizes the agency to choose the source for applicant background checks, add material incorporated by reference, and make technical changes. 15125 is being amended to require an applicant to show evidence of training within the previous 12 months, require an applicant to submit an official copy of a criminal background check, require an applicant to provide a valid driver's license and proof of insurance with not less than 30 days before the expiration date, allow a permit holder to aid establishments owned by the same business, and require permit holders to register to assist affiliated establishments and pay the applicable fee. The staff amendments to these regulations amend various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A, correct citations, and make technical changes.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Kenetha Dorsey.
Is that mic on a green light?
There we go. Kenetha Dorsey, Executive Director.
John Blevins, General Counsel.
Jonathan Rideout, Chairman of the Board of Embalmers and Funeral Directors.
Thank you all for coming today. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments? Is there a second?
Second.
Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Board of Veterinary Examiners, 201 KAR 016562, 016612, 016614, and all of these regulations have staff suggested amendments.
201 KR 16562 amends to modify language for a drug approved by the Board for Euthanasia and update one of the euthanasia methods. 201 KR 16612 establishes the process and effect of issuing a notice to comply and a notice of violation. 201 KR 16614 establishes amounts, limits, or ranges for all fines imposed under KRS Chapter 321, including mandatory fines for first and subsequent offenses ranging from not less than $50 to more than $1,000 depending on the category of the offense. Permissive fines for first and subsequent offenses the board may impose on a person convicted under KRS 321-990 and for costs incurred by the board in processing the case, and outline what is considered a continuing violation. The staff amendments for these three regulations all make changes to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. Additionally, the staff amendment for 201 KAR 16614 amends Section 1 to delete the fine provisions giving the authority to fine for a violation of KRS 321-211 and 442 not specifically provided for in statute.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record, please?
Michelle Shane, Executive Director of the Board.
Dr. John Park, Chairman of the Board of Veterinary Examiners.
Thank you all for coming today. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Our co-chair West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question deals with KAR 16612, the notice to comply and notice of violation. Could you describe what we're currently doing there and what these notices, what does it apply to?
So certainly, Senator West, thank you for that question. It is a new statutory authority provided to the board with the passage of the Practice Act in 2023. It is a tool that we hope to use to enforce better on unlicensed practice and to more quickly resolve grievance cases and cases where there are minor issues.
Okay, so my real question was digging a little bit deeper. So these are people practicing without a license, or are these operations? I guess it could go into operations. It could be farmers, theoretically. Is that true or not?
It shouldn't, because farmers are excluded in the statute to practice on their own animals as they see fit. So that would not apply to them.
Good. That was the main question. I was making sure that there's a clear line there.
Yeah, KRS 321200 exempts them completely.
So we're just mainly worried about these veterinarian people who put themselves out as veterinarians practicing without a license.
That's right. We have multiple open grievances right now against unlicensed practice, and we're trying to find ways to resolve those more quickly and satisfactorily to the constituents.
Thank you.
Senator Thayer first, and Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Park, good to see you today. Appreciate you taking out the time from your busy schedule to join us. I know most veterinarians these days are incredibly overworked. Could you just elaborate, if you would, about this new form of euthanasia? I'm assuming it's a more humane effort when horses do require euthanasia, when no form of medical treatment can save their lives. But if you could just elaborate a little bit for the committee today, I would be very grateful.
Thank you, Senator Thayer, and thank you for your service. That was very touching, and thanks for your many years and your always listening to the veterinary medicine aspects. It's not a new method. It's just as long as it's approved by the USDA, drug wise. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yep, that's fine. Thank you, Dr. Park. And I have enjoyed working with the veterinarians over the last 22 years. And I went to a school that has a really good vet school. I wasn't smart enough to get into it, so I didn't even try. But I do appreciate the really hard work that our vets and vet techs do around the Commonwealth. I know the demand on your services is quite high, and we appreciate all your efforts. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going through it, so I believe that everything would be covered under the best of my remember, it's the Kentucky Practice Act, right, that covers everything that's under. So is there a requirement that veterinarians could carry malpractice insurance under the Kentucky Practice Act?
Yes, sir.
So is there a way, so when people request, if they're operating on their animals or horses, anything else like that, just a copy of the insurance, is that custom and practice to be able to do that, to make sure that that is easily applied to kind of cur the people who practice without a license?
Request by the client or the public or by the board?
By the board.
I'm not aware of.
Yeah, we don't currently request a copy of the PLIT insurance to be on file with the board. It's not a standard practice in the regulations at this time.
But it is required by the Kentucky Practice Act for them to have insurance?
No, there's no requirement in the Practice Act, but I think it's, can you speak to PLIT?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think the Practice Act requires it, but I'm going to have it if I practice. And I've never had a client request it unless I'm being sued, and then the PLIT is through usually our PLIT is through the AVMA, American Veterinary Medical Association Liability Insurance Trust, and I subscribe to that and pay my fee for malpractice insurance. And then if there's need arises, and attorneys appointed by them to represent me.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, just follow, the only reason it comes is it turns out that I've had a couple people who've reached out and said that they had a malpractice, and it turned out that they weren't licensed after they find out that there's a malpractice. There's no one to sue. There's nothing. The person doesn't have assets. And so, like with our bar association, for instance, if we're a member of the KBA or the LBA, there's a requirement that we have a minimum insurance on there, and you could look up and show that we're licensed to practice and that we carry appropriately. Just looking to see if there might be a simple way to be able to put that in place, so we don't have some of the farmers or the people out there who get burnt. Because as a layperson, sometimes you don't know. You'll pick up the phone book and you make a call. And in my practice, I don't operate a whole lot in malpractice, but I've had 2 different incidents where there's been a pretty bad debacle, and one didn't have any kind of insurance, and the other had a license that just wasn't in effect. So I thought maybe a better way to protect the public. It's just something to think about if we can.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Yates.
Thank you both.
We'll definitely look into that. And also just wanted to comment that one of the things the General Assembly did with the Modernized Practice Act in 23 was require veterinary facilities to register. So by June 30, 2025, if you're practicing veterinary medicine in Kentucky, you should be with a registered facility, and that will be published. So we hope that that will also help combat unlicensed practice. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Board of Medical Imaging and Radiation Therapy, 201 KAR 046035, 040, 060, and 046100. 04640 and 100 have staff suggested amendments.
201 KR 46035 amends to update the Code of Ethics and various standards of practice. 201 KR 4640 amends to allow the board to update applications associated with the initial license, renewal, and reinstatement to collect additional information, including questions about whether unlicensed practice occurred prior to application approval and whether an ethics violation occurred with a national certifying body. 201 KR 4660 amends to eliminate continuing education credit for the preparation and presentation of a continuing education program. 201 KAR 46100 amends to provide the opportunity for scholarship recipients to apply for the renewal of their scholarship award, provide additional funding, and eliminate some barriers to the re-award of the scholarship, and update scholarship application and contract forms. The staff amendments for 201 KR 4640 and 100 amend various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Yes. Elizabeth Morgan, Executive Director.
Thank you for coming. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments? Is there a second? Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Board of Emergency Medical Services, 202 KAR 007-201, 301, 330, 560, and 596. 202, 007, 560, and 596 have staff suggested amendments.
202 KAR 7201, 301, and 330 amend reciprocity provisions to implement House Bill 57 from the 2024 regular session of the General Assembly. These amendments allow certified emergency medical responders, certified emergency medical technicians, and advanced emergency medical technicians in good standing in any state to be eligible for reciprocal Kentucky certification instead of only allowing reciprocity in states contiguous to Kentucky. 202 KAR 7560 amends provisions to permit the Board of Emergency Medical Services to temporarily waive paramedic staffing requirements in a Class 1 Advanced Life Support ALS agency upon demonstration of good cause that they have attempted to increase paramedic staffing, and removes the requirement that Class 6 ALS agencies, currently only fire departments that do not transport patients, have to have a licensed paramedic on duty at all times. The temporary waiver of paramedic staffing requirements allowed pursuant to this amendment shall expire on December 31st, 2026. 202 KR 7596 establishes a new administrative regulation that outlines the requirements for the licensing, inspecting, and regulating of mobile integrated healthcare programs as required by KRS 311A 030. The staff suggested amendments amend provisions to specify reference to another administrative regulation, make technical corrections to comply with the drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A, and incorporate a referenced program renewal application form.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Eddie Sloan, Executive Director, Kentucky Board of EMS.
Good afternoon. John Wood, outside counsel for the Board of EMS.
Thank you. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments?
Motion.
Is there a second? Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, I'll get with you on some of the other regs that we talked about, but I appreciate y'all coming and looking forward to talking more.
Thank you all.
Please call the next regulation.
Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet, Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, 301 KAR 003005. And this regulation has a staff suggested amendment.
301 KR 3005 amends to change the time allowed for temporary restrictions on newly acquired or managed land, increasing the duration from 1 to 3 years, and establish the closure of areas to hunting, fishing, or trapping when properties are incompatible for those activities or deemed unsafe. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Jenny Gilbert, Legislative Liaison.
Stephen Fields, Staff Attorney.
Thank you all for coming. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? Is there a second? Without objection, so ordered. Anybody have questions on this? Okay, so I got one question. Whenever you're acquiring these lands and it might not be suitable for the use, what might an instance of that look like?
This was actually a sunset reg, and as we began looking at the language, we realized that since it was written and had not been amended in quite some time, we have property for office space or storing equipment, not just wildlife management areas. And I think sometimes when people or the public think about the land that we own, it's specific to the public use for hunting and fishing. So we needed to put provisions in there for other things. Also, if there's construction being done, I think one of the main provisions we wanted to point out is that we changed the time that we could close that to signage from 1 year to 3 years. Because as you probably know or have experienced, some construction projects or the rental of equipment, different contractors, especially if the work is done outside of the agency, can take much longer than a year. So that's kind of where we came to. Anything else you could think of in terms of specific examples?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? Any other members? Thank you for coming.
Okay.
Please call the next regulation.
Justice and Public Safety Cabinet, 500 KAR 001010, 021, and 030. All regulations have staff suggested amendments.
500 KR 1010 amends provisions to define new terms used in 500 KR Chapter 1 and amend existing definitions related to the filing and processing of claims for peace officer death in the line of duty benefits. 500 KR 1021 establishes a new administrative regulation that outlines the criteria and procedures related to the payment of peace officer death in the line of duty benefits and incorporates forms used in determining the eligibility of an authorized representative's claim for death benefits. 500 KR 1030 amends provisions relating to the process by which a claimant may request a hearing following a denial of peace officer death in the line of duty benefits, consistent with KRS Chapter 13B. The staff suggested amendments amend provisions for consistency with 500 KR 1010 and for consistency with the Bureau of Vital Statistics, include the names of the forms incorporated by reference, and make technical corrections to comply with the drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Nathan Goins, Staff Attorney, Justice and Public Safety Cabinet.
Thank you. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendments? Is there a second? Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members? Seeing none, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Transportation Cabinet 603 KAR 005050, 066, and 350. 603 KAR 005066 has a staff suggested amendment.
603 KAR 5050 is being amended to update Federal Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices to reflect the most current version. 5066 is being amended to update citations. The staff amendment amends various sections to correct statutory citations, comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A, and make technical changes. 603 KR 5350 is being amended to extend the effective date of the regulation to July 1, 2027, and update the OHV safety plan to the current version.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
John Johnson, Office of Legal Services, Assistant General Counsel.
Jason Sawala, Deputy State Highway Engineer.
Tim Tharp, Director, Division of Traffic Operations.
Thank you all for coming. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment?
Motion.
Is there a second? Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you all for coming. Please call the next regulation.
Education and Workforce Development Cabinet, Department for Employment Services, 787 KAR 001360. And this regulation has a staff suggested amendment.
This regulation is being amended to remove the requirement for a waiver request and expand overpayment waiver eligibility dates. The staff amendment amends various sections to add a statutory citation, comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A, and make technical changes.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Buddy Wheatley, Deputy General Counsel of the Education and Labor Cabinet. And Greg Higgins, Executive Director of the Office of Unemployment Insurance.
How you been, buddy?
Great, Representative. How have you been?
Good, my friend, good. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? My co-chair has a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is going to be totally unorthodox, so just so you know what's coming at you. I'm going to make a comment or a statement. It has nothing to do with the regulation that's before us. It's a personal request, if you could look into this. Okay. So on unemployment insurance liens, okay, when the department files one of those liens, as an attorney, that's a cloud on title. So that's a cloud on your real estate title. And the way the payoffs work, you get the payoff from the from the cabinet on an unemployment insurance lien, okay? And you pay the lien off, but it's not released because the client hasn't paid the $5 lien release fee. Could we please, in the future, put the $5 lien release fee on the payoff? That way, when they make the payoff, you're able to release the lien at the clerk's office. And so what you have happening when you're trying to close a house is these people paid off their lien 5 years ago, but the lien's still there because they didn't pay their $5 lien release fee that they didn't know existed. So just I told you it was unorthodox, but if you could report that back and see if you can. I don't know if we need a statute to fix that or if we could do that through regulation maybe. I'm not sure, but it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Perfect sense. Thank
you. Any other member have any questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming. Please call the next regulation.
Labor Cabinet, 803 KAR 002-110 Emergency.
803-110 Emergency amends inspection provisions for employer and employee representatives to clarify that employee representatives may be third-party representatives if there is good cause.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Robin Maples, OSH Standards Specialist.
Good afternoon. Chuck Stribling, Deputy Commissioner, Department of Workplace Standards. Like to wish the subcommittee and all the committee staffers a very merry and happy holiday season.
Thank you, sir. Merry Christmas. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? Is there a second? Sorry, take that back. No amendments on this one, guys. That's on me. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you for coming, and also have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Public Protection Cabinet, Department of Financial Institutions, 808 KAR 015050. This regulation has a staff suggested amendment.
808 KAR 15050 establishes a new administrative regulation to require out-of-state trust companies to make necessary filings at least 30 days prior to commencing business in Kentucky. The filings are required as a result of the passage of House Bill 726 from the 2024 regular session of the General Assembly. The staff suggested amendment makes technical corrections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A and makes technical corrections to material incorporated by reference to comply with authorizing statutes.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Sure. Good afternoon, Marnie Gibson, Commissioner of the Department of Financial Institutions.
And I'm Catherine Adams-Cornett, General Counsel.
Thank you all for coming. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment?
Motion.
Is there a second? Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members? Don't have a question on this. I believe Commissioner John Cooper was going to talk to you, and as well as Mike Biaggi, on the regulation that was deferred regarding credit unions.
Yes.
Just loop me in on that one, and I appreciate your work for it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Cabinet for Health and Family Services, Department for Public Health, 902 KAR 002020 and 002040. 902 KAR 002040 has a staff suggested amendment.
902-2020 amends reportable disease surveillance provisions to remove severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus COVID-19 from the list of urgent reportable conditions, add free-living amoeba infections to the list of priority reportable conditions, revise the reporting requirements for influenza-associated mortality, and update incorporated material. 902-2040 amends syndromic surveillance provisions to add definitions, add syndromic surveillance requirements, including the data elements and data submission procedures required for health professionals and health facilities, delete the authorization for the Cabinet to require periodic medical examinations for certain occupations, and make updates. The staff suggested amendment for 902-2040 amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Thank you all for coming today. Will you please introduce yourselves for the record?
Julie Brooks, Regulation Coordinator, Department for Public Health.
Carol Rush, Reportable Diseases Section Manager, Department for Public Health.
John Prather, Syndromic Surveillance Coordinator, Department for Public Health.
Thank you all for coming. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment?
Motion.
I'll make a second. Without objection, so ordered. My co-chair has a question.
Yes, my question relates to the flu-associated mortality reporting. Could you describe what the reg is doing in that regard?
Yes.
And what we were doing, I guess.
Yes. So our priority for flu mortality surveillance will continue to be on pediatric cases as well as pregnant females, correct?
Yes.
So previously, I believe we had requested, the reportable conditions were for all influenza mortality.
Mm-hmm.
This has been overly burdensome on facilities and public health partners. It has also, we have found, not to be the most significant data that we need to assess and determine the severity of the flu season, which is why we are once again focusing on pediatric cases and pregnant persons.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, we're relaxing the reporting of the flu deaths.
Yes.
And had that changed since COVID?
No.
So that for years there was a requirement to report flu mortality. Is that correct?
Yes, that has been a longstanding requirement.
Gotcha. And we are changing that longstanding requirement through this because it's just difficult for the providers to report the information, I guess?
Yes, that and the significant burden of mortality that we're concerned about would be pediatric cases and pregnant persons. Every flu year, we do have, unfortunately, flu mortality, primarily in elderly individuals. However, if you are most interested in determining the severity of the flu season, it makes more sense to focus your efforts on cases like pediatric cases where mortality would be less expected but still does occasionally occur, as well as among pregnant females.
I guess this is my final question. I'll leave it at this. But I was, with all the technology we have and they have to report cause of death, I was just having a hard time understanding how difficult it is to report that. You know, you've got to report it anyway, and you've got to report a cause of death. So I don't know where I'm wrong. I'm trying to find why it's so difficult on the providers to report that someone passed away from the flu.
Sure.
I'm missing that. Sorry.
Sure. So mortality reporting is a little bit different than health condition reporting, depending on where that individual dies or who codes the death. So we do know that there are a lot of, unfortunately, not a lot, but it does happen where elderly individuals pass in their homes or outside of medical facilities. You might have a coroner then who is determining cause of death, that sort of thing. And in that instance, it may not go through our typical healthcare reported measures for reporting. It might have to be pulled on the back end from like vital statistics data, that kind of thing.
Sounds like it's a lot more complicated than I thought.
Mortality reporting is very complicated.
Thank you.
Senator Yates.
Thank you, and thanks for explaining some of that too. I'm showing my ignorance as well. I'm just doing it through Senator West. I'm looking through.
You're saying I'm ignorant?
Some of this, it's important to get educated through you guys, and I appreciate it. So I'm looking at the summary on 020, and it says they're amending to remove the coronavirus, which is the virus that causes COVID-19, from the list of urgent reportable conditions.
Yes.
Tell me why would we remove that from reportable conditions?
So it's not being removed from reportable conditions, it's being removed from the urgent category. Okay. So that would be things like measles and smallpox and things that we want the healthcare provider to notify within 24 hours. It's being demoted to priority, which is 1 business day. So it's just reflecting that, unfortunately, COVID-19 is now an endemic condition, no longer a novel pathogen, and as such, it's no longer in the highest tier of pathogens that need to be reported.
It's still being reported, just not at the same level as...
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I also have a question on 902 KAR 02020. Free living amoeba infections, is it on the rise?
So thankfully, not significantly. It is considered an emerging pathogen. It is something that we have become more aware of in recent years, and there are multiple reasons for this, partly due to improved diagnostics and ability to detect these kinds of infections. But it is also true that these kinds of organisms thrive in warmer waters, which we're experiencing with warming temperatures and warming bodies of water. So this is something that a lot of states are very interested in monitoring going forward, as the potential consequences of becoming infected with these pathogens is very severe.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Staying with the Department of Public Health, we have 902 KAR 030-200. This has a staff suggested amendment.
902-3200 amends provisions for early intervention service payments made on behalf of eligible recipients to increase the reimbursement rate for providers by 15%, except for reimbursement for an intensive level evaluation and group intervention, establish requirements for tele-intervention service delivery, and establish that Part C funds shall be the payer of last resort. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A and adds incorporated material.
Julie, you're good, but can you introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, I'm Andrew Waters. I'm the Assistant Division Director of Maternal and Child Health in the Department for Public Health.
Thank you for coming. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Without objection, so ordered. First off, we do have a speaker that is in favor of this regulation. If you would like to come forward, Steve Brown. You can just come to the table. Please introduce yourself for the record. The
My
mic
name
yours.
is Steve Brown. Good afternoon. Thank you all for your time and allowing me to speak here. My name is Steve Brown. My wife, Becky, who is a speech therapist, and I own ASCB Therapy. It's an agency. We have been contracted with the state for nearly 15 years with the KEYS program, formerly known as the First Steps program. Becky would join me here today, but it's her birthday and she scheduled time with her mom, so I do apologize. Many of you have probably personally been involved with the KEYS program through services your children have or relatives may have received over the years. Our agency alone has over 100 early intervention therapists comprised of speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, dietitians, and developmental interventionists. They work throughout the state of Kentucky providing these services. Our therapists are providing services just in our agency alone to over 1,400 of Kentucky's little ones aged 0 to 3 years old. I understand that there are nearly 9,000 Kentucky little ones who've received services from all of the different KEYS therapists across the state. You may not be aware, but the KEYS therapists have not received a pay rate increase in over 20 years. This is obviously a sad situation. One of the most important being that becoming a therapist in the KEYS program is now not as desirable, and they're finding other places of employment, and we are losing out on these fantastic candidates. Additionally, we have personally lost some of our therapists due to this as well. We run the risk of losing some of our very seasoned therapists. This long overdue rate increase will encourage the new therapists to work within the KEYS program and also inspire new therapists to remain with the program. I would kindly request your support of this rate increase for all of Kentucky's KEYS providers. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Were there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Please call the next regulation.
Department for Medicaid Services, 907 KAR 001044 and 015006.
907 KR 1044 amends to revise definitions, incorporate a new manual for community mental health centers, add new covered services including withdrawal management, medication-assisted treatment, applied behavior analysis, chemical dependency treatment center services, and narcotic treatment programs if separately licensed, and add provider reporting requirements. 907 KR 15005 amends to add or revise several definitions, including behavioral health associate, behavioral health crisis, behavioral health secure crisis transportation, and approved behavioral health practitioner under supervision. 907 KR 1044 and 15055 were originally deferred from March, found deficient and deferred at the October 15th ARRS meeting, and had been deferred from November.
Additionally, a new section has been added to both regulations to reflect October's findings of deficiency.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
I'm Alan Brenzel, the Medical Director for the Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities in the Cabinet for Health and Family Services.
I'm Jonathan Scott, the Department for Medicaid Services, Chief Legislative and Regulatory Officer.
Thank you all for coming. We did find both of these regulations deficient in the October meeting. However, if you would like to present, or I understand if not, either way.
Was going to mention that we did have a meeting with the group that objected. We were not able to arrive at any specific changes to the regulations. It's their preference that the MHAs not be regulated. As we understand that, they may wish to provide some additional comments going forward. Going forward, we are concerned with quality requirements if we do not have a minimal level of qualifications, including a requirement that behavioral health associates be pursuing licensure, and that there be an initial training and orientation process for those employees. We also want to clarify that this is to be for a definite and finite period of time, 5 years if an individual is seeking a 30 to 59-hour master's program, 6 years if an individual is seeking a 60-plus hour master's program, and 10 years if they're seeking a doctoral program. It's not a permanent position type, as this is an unlicensed provider type that is not subject to any licensure board. And we also do have some concerns about the pay disparities. They are paid a high rate relative to psychiatrists, psychologists, and APRNs. It's only within a couple of dollars, as we understand, when we look at the fee schedules compared to what they are paid within CMHCs versus what we are paying psychologists, psychiatrists, and APRNs within BHSOs, BHMSGs, and other private provider groups. Also, I'd like to mention that we do believe that we are expanding our provider base. We have identified 173 behavioral health services organizations, over 500 behavioral health multi-specialty groups, and over 1,200 private provider offices who will now be able to seek to employ what were previously called mental health associates, and that we are proposing to begin calling behavioral health associates. So there will be an expanded opportunity for individuals who are pursuing licensure, who are in graduate schools, to seek employment with different types of providers, and to really benefit our existing Medicaid recipients who could be in those facilities. And we believe that will make better providers and will enhance the services that these other facilities are offering. I'll stop there. Do you have anything you'd like to?
So just as a practicing child psychiatrist, as well as adult, this regulation to me is an example of a lot of very difficult work. And the Cabinet's goal is to balance quality and safety for individuals served with a very difficult work force shortage in behavioral health, with, as you know, an existing increasing challenges around behavioral health. But this legislation attempts to create a scenario in which we are ensuring that individuals who are seeing, diagnosing, and developing treatment plans for individuals have appropriate licensure, but also create a scenario where we have individuals with bachelor's degree who are in training can serve those individuals under the supervision of those with licenses. And in my opinion, this strikes a compromise between those two very divergent and difficult forces.
Thank you. Senator Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate your testimony. And after last time we had the hearing, I went back and over my years, a lot of times I have to put my other hat on, my attorney hat. And I've had some cases. In fact, I have one in litigation right now that sometimes that unlicensed or under-licensed and unsupervised individuals can do a lot of damage. In fact, you see sometimes suicide and everything else that can. So it's dangerous when you put somebody in a position of trusted authority in the event that they don't have the same training that the community would expect. At the same time, you're balancing to make sure that people have behavioral health resources, whether it's addiction services, everything else. There's got to be a balance. There has to be supervisor, there has to be training. I was looking, though, my worry was that we don't have enough. But I'm also looking at, we also have some of these monster for-profit clinics that are under the license of one doctor who brings in all kinds of people who have a temporary license that say they're working towards it and are just rolling people through like cattle without them getting substandard care, and it's abused. And so we're in a tough spot because we don't have enough. But my fear in Kentucky is ever that we continue to lower our standards without appropriate oversight, that we put our people in danger because they trust in us to have these boards and commissions to have those oversight. So I just want to let you know I did do some homework since the last time you were here, and I appreciate your testimony.
Any other members have any questions? Senator Rocky Adams.
Mr. Chairman, maybe just a point of clarification, but this was found deficient, so I'm confused as to why we're revisiting it. Can I have some clarification on that?
They were found deficient, and then we deferred it, and then it was deferred again. And so it's before our committee today in the hopes that conversation would have taken place and we could have done away with the deficiency. However, that has not happened.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members with questions? Thank you all for coming. These have been found deficient, but I do appreciate your time today. Please call the next regulation.
Department for Community-Based Services, 921 KAR 003030, 922 KAR 001490, and 005120.
921 KR 3030 amends to delete language related to drug felonies for consistency with statute that exempts all individuals residing in Kentucky from the application of a federal law that would have barred individuals convicted of drug felonies from being eligible for SNAP, and update the application for SNAP form for consistency and to add a question about internet expenses that is now an allowable deduction.
922 KAR 1490 is being amended to include background check and independent relative adoptions, and include that foster and adoptive applicants shall undergo a child abuse or neglect check and sex offender registry check conducted by the Cabinet annually, increase the administrative fee for the CARES fingerprint-based background check, and delete an obsolete form.
922 KR 5120 amends for consistency with Senate Bill 145 from the 2024 regular session, including to authorize health facilities or health care providers enrolled in Medicaid to check the adult misconduct registry for current or prospective employees and notify vulnerable adult service providers if a queried individual has appealed a substantiated finding of adult abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and that appeal is pending. The amended after comments version amends various sections to comply with CARES Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Hi, my name is Rachel Ratliff. I'm Staff Assistant for the Department for Community-Based Services.
Thank you, Rachel. And I appreciate you all deferring last month. Allowed me to educate myself more on the issue. I think it's good policy, and I appreciate your time. There are no amendments on this. Do any members have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. We are into other business now. We'll jump off from there.
Justice and Public Safety Cabinet, Department of Corrections, 501 KAR 6020.
This administrative regulation establishes the policies and procedures for the Department of Corrections.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Cookie Cruz, Commissioner, Department of Corrections.
Thank you, Commissioner, for coming today. This has been on our radar for a while, some of the regulations being put forth, and so today we just wanted to give the opportunity to discuss some of these regulations before us that are coming up. It is my understanding your agency has requested an AG opinion coming up.
14.8.
Okay. Well, jumping off, my co-chair had a few questions to start off with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions will deal with the services that were added through memo for hormone and surgical procedures in August of 2021 and June of 2023.
So I'm not prepared to talk about that. We want to defer it until we get that AG's opinion.
Okay. I think I'll let the chair come back, and it's at his discretion. But I think we were going to have a discussion today of the reg before us. But
I wasn't prepared for that. So.
Okay. Let me try to make it more clear, and maybe you may know. What has the department been doing in this area since then? What has been happening? Are these procedures being performed or not performed? Do we know that?
What procedures are you talking about?
I'm talking about hormone replacement or surgical procedures?
No, we have not had any surgical procedures.
Okay. And so the policies that were changed and added by memo, I guess, I mean, you should know what those changed to, right? What are you requesting in the Attorney General's opinion? Let me make that
The
more
part
clear.
about gender reassignment surgeries.
So let me clarify whether or not the department is required to cover the costs of
That's
the gender reassignment surgeries?
That's correct.
Okay. So that's the request of the department to the Attorney General. So I think that's pretty clear then that the department intends to do that, intends to provide those services.
It depends on what the Attorney General says. But again, I'm not prepared to talk about that either until we get their opinion.
So in other words, you're saying if the Attorney General says you're not required to cover the cost, then you're not going to provide the service. Is that what you're...
I would like to wait until we get his or her opinion.
Okay. I'll hold off for now.
Senator Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm a little confused. You filed a reg, but you don't want to talk about it. These policies and procedures were established by internal memo 3 years ago outside of the regulatory or legislative process because you know that they would never pass. And we've just had an election where we saw that these issues regarding transgender surgeries were a factor. And now you want to put it off on the Attorney General, waiting what his opinion will be, which I can probably predict what it's going to be. So why did you come today if you weren't prepared to talk about a reg that your agency promulgated?
Because we're on the, we didn't come last month, and you all were asking for somebody from the department, so came this way.
Okay, I want to go on the record here before I leave that I don't think the taxpayers of Kentucky are really interested in paying for hormone replacement therapy or transgender surgeries for people who have been found guilty of committing crimes against the Commonwealth. And I think you all just should stop even pursuing this. My prediction is you're going to meet with tremendous resistance from not only this committee, but also the legislature that's going to convene on January 7th. And I think you're wasting our time. I think you're wasting the taxpayers' time. And frankly, I think this administration's pursuit of this out of the mainstream taxpayer-funded procedure is an insult. And you ought to just stop. Because if you don't, it's going to blow up into a much bigger issue than just this little subcommittee today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Frazier Gordon.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today. Senator West was asking about, in regards to the letter that you, and you replied that there had been no surgeries. What about the hormone, the issuing of that in preparation?
I think everything is in the packet. We sent something over. Did you, the opinion part? I just want to make sure you got it.
Okay. And then my other comment, the opinion that you're requesting from the Attorney General looks like this is dated December 6th. So did you just make this inquiry on Friday?
That's correct.
Again, after this has been an issue for 3 years, knowing that we had asked you to come for several months. Thank you.
Real quick, jumping back to that packet, I do see the legal background. I do not see any information as far as what services have been provided, or if hormone replacement or hormone therapy has been provided.
Well, for today, I'm asking for an opinion. So.
And in January, we'll be back in session. Let's see, Senator Yates.
Thank you. So thank you for being here. And so I'm trying to clarify, and I understand that right now the federal government, there's been lawsuits in place. And so the federal government has found sometimes in civil suits under the 8th Amendment that prisons to be liable for failure to comply with what a doctor would say is reasonable and necessary. And so it sounds like that to avoid litigation and cost, you've sought an opinion from our Attorney General to state whether or not the department is required or not required. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so what you're saying is you're going to rely on the Attorney General's opinion as to whether or not you're required to provide these services or not required.
That's correct.
And then as we get into, and I do know it can get more and more difficult as you talk about reasonable and necessary treatment with hormones, because sometimes it's taken outside of, more often than not, it would be far outside of any type of transgender or other things. For instance, a woman that had a hysterectomy, or different ways that their hormones can sometimes be required medically. And so that's why I know you get down into the weeds of that and what's determined. I know it may be difficult as non-lawyer to try to speak, especially about possible, because either way you go, there's going to be litigation, I would assume, onto it. So my understanding today, and I didn't know that there would be even any hearing on it, I was understanding that there was simply a letter written to the Attorney General that asked, please advise whether or not the department is required to provide and cover the cost, and you're waiting for that opinion.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Back to Co-Chair West.
So just to jump off Senator Yates, words mean things, and so words are very important. So is it asking the Attorney General's opinion or on that, or is it asking the Attorney General's opinion on whether or not the department is required to cover the cost of the gender reassignment surgeries?
Well, because I'm not an attorney, I cannot answer that.
Okay. So I guess the question that jumps out after this is, we put this stuff in place with internal memos at the department. Why didn't we ask for the Attorney General's opinion then when we were doing it, rather than, what was the rush? Why did we just go ahead in August of 2021 and June of 2023 and do this through internal memos and not follow the regulatory process?
You know, I don't really remember that, but I'll research it and respond back to you. I don't want to say something that's
Sure.
not true.
That's fine. And so I have no more questions. I'd like to make a comment, Mr. Chairman, if it's in order. I'm going to echo Senator Thayer on this. This doesn't look good or sound good the way this has progressed. It's like the department is making its own law internally and not going through the legislative process. Clearly, it's not the intent of this legislature to provide such services and pay for such services. And if there's a federal law or federal regulation involved, we need to know about that and review that. So I look forward to further discussion on it, maybe next month in the committee and as we get into session. Thank you.
Do any other members have questions or concerns? Senator Rocky Adams.
I just have one question. Thank you for being here today. Do we have any trans women in the women's prison?
Yes.
And how many?
I don't know. I'll get back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions or comments? I just have one. We will be submitting, going into next month, another request for data and information. It's under 13A 030, duties of the subcommittee. and that is within our scope. So we will be requesting for specifics as far as what procedures have been performed and what therapies have been given. But I appreciate your time here today. Thank you. That being said, that is the end of our agenda, I believe.
Let's see, the upcoming, one moment, please. We currently have the January meeting for the 13th at 1 p.m. However, that is during the break for session. So if changes need to be made.
13th, it's during the break.
Monday the 13th.
I think we're okay with that.
All right. At 1 p.m.
And I just want to say it's been a productive year. I appreciate everybody's work on this committee. Just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Appreciate all the work you do. Thank you.
Yes.